Hello everyone, it's the Effort Adventure here with another album review, and today I'm doing Yeezus by Kanye West. This was by request. As you can see, there is no cover art, there's no liner notes. All it is just this piece of tape, the CD itself, and on the back you do have some sampling credits, as you can see, but this is it. And keep that in mind because this whole setup with no cover art or anything is very important to the aesthetic of the album and the idea behind the album itself. So anyways, this album was released on June 18th of 2013. Some chart information about it: it peaked at #1 on the US Billboard 200 and #1 on the US Billboard Top R&B Hip Hop Albums chart. It was released on the label Def Jam, and its only singles are Black Skinhead and Bound 2. So without further ado, let's get this started. So this album, as of right now, stands as Kanye's most recent release. Even though this album was requested, I've had this album on my list of albums to review for a long time, and the reason it's taken so long is because I was wondering if I should wait to do this until after Kanye's new album, Swish, comes out, or to do it before then, but I'm going to go ahead and knock it out right now. I'm going to do that because there have been rumors that Swish is actually cancelled. I don't really believe them, but I do have a feeling that Swish won't be coming out for a while. I don't know why, but you know. Anyways, to be honest, I don't know if I've ever invested this much time and thought into an album as much as I have this one, being that this album in particular is so polarizing for both fans and critics alike. Before Kanye started work on this particular LP, he spent a great deal in Europe, specifically France, doing a great deal of studying on various architectural wonders and achievements. He went to the famed Louvre Museum at least 5 times and took field trips to different buildings that French architect Le Corbusier designed. He saw these as his main inspiration for doing this album, as they were very radical and, in a sense, minimalistic, hence the production choices and the musical texture, as well as the album cover itself. He also wanted to add some elements of house to this record as it represented his home of Chicago, where house originated from. With all that preparation done, he then began working on the album itself, and interestingly enough, he did a lot of guerrilla-style promoting for it. In about 66 different places worldwide, he set up projections for his song New Slaves to be shown in the streets against building walls. If there was one way to get people to get hyped for an upcoming album, that's definitely it. Anyways, we've been talking enough about the going-ons before the album was released, so let's talk about the actual album itself now. The first track on here is On Sight, and I feel that this track does a great job in giving the listener a good feel for what this album is going to be like. Now, I've noticed that a lot of people who really don't like this track very much, some hate it, and I kind of understand why. It's mainly for the beat. The lyrics definitely aren't why, as Kanye comes up with some very clever and interesting lyrics like "we'll get this thing shaking like Parkinson's," which admittedly shouldn't be funny, especially considering the American Parkinson Disease Association responded calling it distasteful and the product of obvious ignorance. But this is really just Kanye being Kanye, and he's not the first or last person to reference the disease in his songs. The track itself feels incredibly skeletal, and what I mean by that is that there really isn't much there besides the main arpeggiated line. A lot of these tracks are produced by Daft Punk, hence why he spent a lot of time studying house music beforehand, and it really shows on a lot of these tracks, as a great deal of them have a very electro house, dance, and dub influence ingrained on them. But yes, the beat would be the main reason people don't like this track. It's too weird, it's too different, and for some, it could seem lazy, but this is what he was going for. Something different and something very barren. The song itself is basically Kanye talking about how he's going to give us some more great music and more from his clothing line. A great introduction in my eyes. Now, track 2 is widely considered to be the best track on the album, and that would be Black Skinhead, often characterized as Black with 3 Ks and Skinhead with 3 Ks. Its style is very industrial, and it has a very visceral, aggressive, and abrasive sound, almost sounding like it has some metal influences from its pounding jungle drums. This is the first track that brings one of the main themes of this LP to fruition, and that is racism, or rather anti-racism. He's encouraging African Americans to stand up for themselves in this racist society, and this is really one of the standout tracks on this album, as well as one of the best tracks in terms of pure emotion and lyrical value. One line that particularly stands out is when he says, "I keep it 300 like the Romans," On the surface, this might perplex some people, since the film 300 was actually about the Spartans, but looking into it, the Roman numeral 300 is actually CCC, which could also be slang for calm, cool, and collected, or so some say anyways. Quite clever indeed. At the end of this track, it leads directly into the next track, I Am a God, as Kanye keeps repeating the word God, getting more and more raspy and angry sounding. Originally, it was believed that this album was to be titled I Am a God, which of course caused controversy. Then it was revealed that there was a track called I Am a God. Any less controversy? Probably not, but even still, this track is apparently inspired by Psalm 82, but at its core, Kanye is expressing how he basically is a god of music. His production and beats are otherworldly. The man has 21 Grammy Awards, and My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is considered one of the best albums of the past decade. Besides that, nearly all of his albums could be considered classics, especially his freshman, sophomore, and junior releases. Unfortunately, this particular track never really struck a chord with me. I wasn't impressed by it, and it's not so much because of the lack of lyricism. It's just really bland for me. It has that house feel that I was talking about earlier, and yes, it's produced by Daft Punk again, but all in all, it's just one of those, it's one of the least impressive tracks on the album compared to some of the others. I had to listen to this album a good number of times to really get a good feel for the tracks and the album itself. A lot of the tracks really did grow on me, but I already had a good idea of what I liked and what I didn't, and for the most part it stayed the same. But, like I said, a lot of the tracks really did grow on me because there were some that I just really did not like at all before I gave it more listens. One track that grew on me was definitely Hold My Liquor, which sees Kanye dealing with an internal conflict of fighting his demons. It features both Justin Vernon and Chief Keef, and it's incredibly atmospheric. It might be the most well done and most intricate track on this entire album. This album is full of seemingly barren beats, however this one feels the most full, for lack of a better word. Speaking of which, Kanye recruited producer Rick Rubin about 15 days before the album was set to release in order to help strip down a lot of the beats and sounds for this record. He did a really good job in my eyes, as a lot of the beats seem like they're full on the surface, but taking a deeper look into it, you can hear that a lot of these beats are just fragments pieced together, and not a whole lot of fragments at that. It's a very interesting production style chosen by someone who's very well known for having his beats, be full of strings and horns and 808s and sub bass and all these other effects. Another thing to note, during the course of this album's post-release and Kanye's Yeezus tour, Kanye started wearing various masks during his live performances. I don't know about y'all, but I kind of actually dig it. For me, there's always been something about artists that wear masks that just seems so cool to me. The tracks New Slaves and Blood on the Leaves continue the theme of anti-racism. New Slaves focuses mainly on racial stereotypes and how wealth and fame changes the perception of various African Americans. For example, when Kanye was younger, whenever he went into a store, the clerk would tell him to not touch anything, thinking that he would steal something. Now that he's rich and famous, clerks tell him to please come in and buy more. Then he starts listing off things that blacks typically want, like fur coats and diamond chains, proclaiming through the voice of white America that all you blacks want all the same things. This track is a good example of the beats being very barren and very skeletal, as the only things you hear are strings and the beat itself. The other track, Blood on the Leaves, is definitely a favorite of mine. Next to Black Skinhead, this is definitely the heaviest track on the album. It doesn't start out that way though. It starts out by sampling Nina Simone's rendition of Strange Fruit, which is a song protesting racial injustice and lynching specifically. As Kanye comes in, the beat soon goes into an incredibly heavy sound with blaring horns and trap influences. Interestingly enough, this track has Kanye singing as opposed to rapping, and I feel it's a good change of pace from all the rapping done so far on this short LP. Although I say it's about anti-racism, it's really only the sample that talks about anti-racism, as the song itself is actually about Kanye meeting a girl. With the remaining tracks, there are only about two that I really liked. Guilt Trip is another track that kind of grew on me. It was originally meant for Watch the Throne, and it kind of has that vibe to it too. It mainly talks about Kanye needing to break up with a girl. And what I really like about this is Kanye's flow, which is unlike anything I've heard before. I was most impressed by his unique flow here, but the beat itself is pretty impressive too, featuring samples from Popcorn and singing from Kid Cudi. The other track I really liked, I'll get to in just a bit, but I really didn't feel I'm In It or Send It Up at all. I'm In It is all about sex, and besides the beat change, it really doesn't have any redeemable factors. The latter, Send It Up, is actually the weakest track on the album. It's incredibly short and only has one verse from Kanye. The only part about it that I could say that I like is how the beat turns out near the end with that loud, piercing, metallic noise, but that's it. Now, the final track on the album, and the other track I really liked, was Bound 2. Some of you may know that Kanye created a music video for this particular track, and it turned out to be quite atrocious, but people tend to love the track itself. Now, it took me a while to realize this revelation, but after 9 tracks of Kanye experimenting with all different sounds and effects, at the very, very end of it all, he gives us one track that's a throwback to how his first album, College Dropout, was. It samples the soul song Bound by Ponderosa Twins Plus One, as well as has an interlude by soul singer Charlie Wilson. Now, I've already reviewed this track by itself before, so I need not say too much more about it, but what's really interesting is that Kanye gave this to us at the end to show that he still has it. He knew that 9 tracks that made up the experimental side of Yeezus would be one way or the other for a lot of people. He knew that a lot of people probably wouldn't like it because it was just too different and too weird. So he gave us Bound 2 as a means to show that he hasn't changed his style completely, and he still knows what his fans like, and that's his classic, timeless soul samples in his songs. Overall, for a long time I wasn't a huge fan of this album, but now that I've reviewed it and have given it a bunch of listens, I must say I actually do quite enjoy this album. Yes, there are some spots where I'm just kind of like, meh, but the majority of the tracks I think are fantastic. My favorites were Black Skinhead, New Slaves, Blood on the Leaves, On Sight, and Bound 2. Like I said, Send It Up is definitely the weakest and worst track on here from a musical standpoint, and the others, while they may not have been great, have at least some redeeming factors. Kanye wanted to convey feelings of racism in the world, as well as him just dealing with the media and fashion companies and industries. He knows the media loves to hate on him, but he shows that he really just doesn't care, because he's still making great music and still has tons of fans worldwide. It was really cool that he got Daft Punk to collaborate with him because, of course, Kanye previously sampled their song Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger when he did the song Stronger for his album Graduation, and it's really clear to see their influence on this particular album, especially the house aspect of it. I definitely recommend that you check out this album, at least give it a listen before you make a decision to buy it and add it to your collection. And I urge you to listen with open ears and an open mind, because if you're not used to experimental hip-hop or experimental music, period, this may be harder for you to listen to, but still give it a couple listens before making a final decision on it. Anyways, thank you all for joining me on this another album review. I know it was really lengthy, I'm sorry, but there was a lot that had to be said, and I wanted to get it all out. But anyways, if there's a song or an album that you like or may recommend, and you want it to be reviewed on my show, just leave a comment down below and I'll get to it as soon as I possibly can. And also, if you like this video, please hit that like button and show your love. And also subscribe if you want more and to know when I'm going to release new things. And check out my Facebook and my Twitter and everything. Links are in the description. But anyways, thank you again, and I will see you in the next video. So long.